Hi guys, and welcome back to the Pickle Jar for another Monster Hunter painting tutorial. Today we are going to be tackling the final monster in the Ancient Forest box, the Rathalos. Before we get started with the painting, I need to fix the wings. Now unfortunately, I'm not sure if this is just the version that I had or if this is a common problem with this box, but the wings didn't seem to want to fit in place like it looked like they should. So what I ended up doing was cutting away some of the excess on the wings to make sure that they would fit in as snugly as possible. And then once I'd used some super glue and activator just to secure them in place so that they weren't moving, I went in with some green stuff. I used a variety of liquid green stuff and UV resin just to fill in those gaps and hide where the joins were. I'm not using any fancy sort of modeling or sculpting techniques. I'm just sort of chucking it on and letting the rest of the texture on the model hide it and blend it in and do it for me. Once I primed it in a black, I started working on the wings. Now I'm applying a sort of burn cream colour to the wings through an airbrush at first. I'm using the airbrush, as I usually do for most miniatures that I paint, especially big miniatures like this. I like to use the airbrush because it's easy to get nice, even coverings over large areas, whereas it takes quite a long time with the brush. If I can speed up that process, especially to start with, then I'm going to do that. Once I got that cream down on the wings, I started going in with a deep red on all the scaled areas, so that's all down its back, its face, its head, around the edges of the wings to add that in. The reason I've added the cream first and then the red is because the overspray from that red will sort of blend into that cream and help it look like it's all one creature, and that sort of red scales blends out into the creamy on the wing. I'm using a lighter red through the airbrush now, just using that in a directional spray, just so that it catches those top areas and leaves the recessed areas in that sort of darker red and black. And then all I'm doing is taking an even lighter red and dry brushing that all over the models to catch out those very top raised areas, catch out all those scales and pick that detail out. Once I was happy with all the red on the model, I started applying the black details. So there's a few on the face and then down the spine, the claws on the wings, things like that, and a few on the front legs. And all I'm doing for this is using a small dry brush, and I'm just sort of stippling it on, dry brushing it on. I'm not being too worried as to whether it's a complete covering. I don't mind if there's a little bit of that red showing through or if the blends are not super neat, because I want to sell the sort of organicness of this model. This is a living, breathing creature, and I want to show that the scales aren't going to be fully one colour or fully another, and that there's going to be some variation between the red and the black scales and the blending between the two. Now that I've got the majority of the work done using an airbrush and a dry brush, it's time to start adding in the detailed work. So I'm adding in some of the patterns on the wings, just using a small brush and just going in, just creating random patterns. I then dry brushed the sort of raised areas on the wings and dry brushed those a little bit with the red that I'd used earlier on, just to sort of separate out those parts of the wings so it wasn't one big flat area. I then added a bit of a wash to the wings. I watered this down a little bit so it wasn't straight out the pot and underneath, just because I wanted to sort of grime it up a little bit and tie it in with the rest of the models from the Monster Hunter box that I've been painting. At this point I was pretty much done, and I was sort of taking a look around the model and decided that some of the red needed highlighting a little bit further than what it already had been done. So I just took a small brush, I used the brightest red that I'd got, and just started to edge highlight some of the scales, especially around the face, just because I want to call out those really nice details on there, but also some on the legs and stuff as well, just to add that extra detail. You don't need to highlight every single scale on the model like this, but if you can pick out enough, especially around the face, around some of the other big features like on the legs and things like that, it will go a long way and it'll look like you've put that extra effort in. With the majority of the model done, it's just time to finish off the details such as the tongue, the mouth, the teeth and the eyes. I really want the eyes to pop, so I painted them a bright white first, a nice bright base coat, and then used a bright blue ink over the top just to make sure that that really popped against the red. For the basing on this model, I'm using a very similar technique that I've used on all the rest of the models in this box. I'm starting out with some mud texture paint all across the base, giving that a bit of a dry brush and a wash just to make sure that it sort of looks good enough by itself. And then I'm going to use some Geek Gaming Scenics fast drying basing glue on the edges, on the left and the right hand side, so I can tell those arcs apart from the front and the back. And then once that is all on, chucking down the base ready on there on top. Now, a couple of people have asked, and I think I mentioned it in the last one, but I'm using the moss effect from Dirty Down, just sort of pipetting that on while the glue's drying, and that way it sort of soaks into the base ready and gives a few different variations on there. Adding a couple of tufts, and that's the final model in the Ancient Forest box complete. When I first got this box, this is the one that I was really looking forward to painting the most, and I had an absolute blast working on it. I hope you've enjoyed watching this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. I am going to be working on more Monster Hunter models coming up in the near future, so make sure you stay tuned and subscribe if you're not. And until then, guys, enjoy your hobby.